Hello, happy Thursday. It's a big show.
Big show.
Big show.
Yeah. I'm just going to turn that over there because money shot. Okay. There we go.
Well, I'm liking the sweatshirt.
Yeah, vote with your cash, hey?
Yeah. Uh-oh, what's going on?
Oh, Kix is kicking us out, so
Oh,
just take that out.
okay. No kick tonight.
Well, you just keep talking because I am now officially
Working on our streams. We're having some stream issues, which is very bizarre. Well, or is it? Probably not. It's probably very right on the money. So there was a lot of Axe the Tax protests that started today. Actually, I think they started 2 days ago, but I know our dear friend Melissa Outwater was touring the Durham region, hitting up the MP offices in Pickering, Ajax, and Whitby, and it looked like they had a bit of a convoy following and got out in front of the offices and basically spoke about their displeasure of the carbon tax and not happy that these MPs are supporting it. The Liberal MPs and DP MPs are supporting it. So congratulations to you guys for starting that off. We know every single day, right up until at least next Friday anyway, there are events scheduled all across Canada and definitely here in Ontario. There's something going on every single day. So maybe get in contact with your fellow your fellow friends to find out where they're going to be, whose office they're going to be protesting next, or what bridge they're going to be standing over on April 1st at 10 a.m. So congratulations to you guys. Thank you for supporting and thank you for standing up. Unfortunately, Mondays and Thursdays are show days for us. So
we'd be here.
We are here, hard at work, unfortunately. But thank you for standing up and representing.
That's it. We'll mention it now. We'll mention it after the show, just in case we forget. We're off Monday.
Monday is a stud holiday because it is Easter weekend.
Easter.
So
Good Friday tomorrow.
Yes.
Good day of reflection. Easter Sunday. Off Monday. So we're going to take the holiday.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit, I'm a little guilty because we just took a week off. So.
Yeah, but it was a much needed week off. You needed to just decompress.
Detox. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a big show, lots of media, lots of stuff to go talk about. This show is in tandem, I guess, with our transhumanism show, which we did last time on Monday. So if you haven't seen that, head over there and watch that because it's such a big subject. We've already done overpopulation, so we've already talked about that. We talked about transhumanism and now eugenics. And the big secret is that eugenics never went away. And I know that we know designer babies and all that stuff, but it's still being practiced in all of the old nasty forms that it was. And they've just reworded it in a lot of ways. So case in point, family planning is all rooted in eugenics. We'll get into that later. But then you look at now, you add the element of like MAID, for example, and it's not just people who are not feeling well anymore. It's now people who are mentally ill and people who have no money. So there are terms for those people as per the old eugenicists.
Crypto eugenics. That's what that is. Crypto eugenics.
Explain.
Crypto eugenics is what eugenics has rolled into when people started defining eugenics with a very negative connotation. The British Society of Eugenics and the American Society of Eugenics decided to sort of reinvent themselves with a crypto eugenics, and that is Planned Parenthood, birth control, abortions, MAID, legalized euthanasia for those who are on deathbeds, etc., etc. So that is now considered crypto eugenics.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, the shots.
Oh, the shots. Yeah, we'll talk about
and not just current shots, but shots all the way through. Anybody that knows about South Africa and the horrible tuberculosis shots that were handed out to the populations there actually ended up causing sterilization.
Right. And we just came across a website called Imogen, I believe it's called, and somebody sent it our way. It is pig sterilization to get rid of pig taint, and not the kind that you think, that just the gross taste of boars who have not been castrated. So it's castrated, it's sterilization through like a chemical castration, but their spike protein that does this looks very familiar. And in the questions is like, well, what happens if I accidentally inject myself with this pig sterilization? Well, it takes 2 shots. Yeah, so I wouldn't want to do it again because it does work on people. So we know about shedding, and we know about, and they're injecting pigs with it.
We know about the mosquitoes they're releasing. So yeah, that's all considered crypto eugenics.
Right. So yeah, anybody who eats pork is in trouble. That's for sure. So you Jewish people, it looks like you're going to be breeding like crazy. So should we send all letters to Jody at tfmreport.com.
So should we start at the beginning? Did you bring your notes down?
No, we're winging this sucker.
You had a very lovely notes. So.
Yeah, I did have a very lovely notes. Yeah. So let's start with the beginning. What is eugenics?
So what is eugenics? Eugenics, or the idea of good birth, was the scientific movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. At the core of the movement's belief system was the conviction that human heredity was fixed and immutable, that it's nature, not nurture, that makes you the human being that you are. The idea in a nutshell is this, that if you can breed a better dog or horse, as humankind has been doing for centuries, we can breed a better person and a better national body. Eugenics was an international movement, and in its heyday, right before the First World War, Great Britain, the United States, and Germany were leaders in the movement. Each might have had their own agenda, but most eugenicists everywhere had some ideas in common. First, they wanted to find who in their society is valuable, to pick out the good stock and encourage them to reproduce. Second, they wanted to find the bad stock, those who are seen as a burden on society, and discourage them from reproducing. And third, they want to keep the races from intermarrying. And we'll see the results of these efforts today. First, in compulsory sterilization laws, both the United States and Nazi Germany imposed in the first half of the 20th century.
Well, that's a good start. She explains that fairly well. And then this is from Leonard Darwin, who is actual Charles Darwin's cousin.
No, this is Charles Darwin's son.
I just can't keep up. There's several Darwins in play here.
Well, it's Sir Francis Galton that is the cousin.
Okay, I know, but there's Leonard Darwin, and then there's like 7 other Darwins involved. Just the Baldwins of the scientific community back in the day. So he did What is Eugenics, and this is basically getting into apologetics, because eugenics was starting to get in a bad light. So he wrote a whole book trying to praise eugenics. And he starts with this: owners of cattle have always known that the care in the selection of stock for breeding purposes will pay them well in the long run. Publication of stud books proves that what careful consideration is given to the performances of the ancestors of existing horses. And if men, however savage or however cultivated, have always given so much time to the study of the breed of the animals they own, why have they not paid equal attention or more attention to their own breed? The aim of eugenics is to prove that the breed of our own citizens is a matter of vital importance when considering the future. Yeah. Now, on a side note, there is eugenics annuals, like quarterly. They have big reports on everything eugenics, and it's on archive.com, but most of the pages are redacted. And I've never actually seen that before, but they are mostly redacted with this particular thing.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. You know what? I do know why. Because everybody looks at eugenics as a Hitler thing. But what they don't realize, and which we definitely discovered looking at the United Nations, et cetera, is that eugenics actually started in the UK.
Yep.
And then it traveled over to the US. And then it was like, I think there was like 13 different countries doing it before Germany jumped on board. So the UK and the US are responsible at the end of the day for the idea of the Holocaust, probably for the idea of the Bolsheviks as well, the Holodomor, if I had to guess, because it's all based on, getting rid of, annihilating a particular race.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't see that anywhere in the 11 hours of Europa. So how did they think? What was normal thinking for the eugenicists back then? Now, the States admittedly took it in a darker turn than most up until Hitler. So this was a fundraiser pamphlet that was sent out in North Carolina. You wouldn't expect a moron to run a train, would you? Now, just in case you don't know, a moron is a person whose mind never develops beyond that of a 10-year-old child. This is a good time to disclaim that we are just repeating what we're reading.
This is historical. Historical information we're giving you, the history of eugenics leading up to today. Okay. So that's the train.
Normal vernacular. Yeah. You wouldn't let a feeble-minded woman teach school, would you? You wouldn't want the state to grant driver's licenses to mental defectives, nor expect such defectives to handle money wisely.
Chrystia Freeland.
You wouldn't give a responsible person or position to a person of little intelligence.
Oh, Trudeau.
Yet, each day, the feeble-minded and mentally defective are entrusted with the most important and far-reaching job of all. The job of parenthood, the creation of new life and responsibility of rearing children.
Having a healthy, normal baby is the most important of all jobs. It is also important that babies have good physical care and loving, thoughtful guidance. The average feeble-minded parent cannot be expected to provide good heredity, a normal home, intelligent care, to say nothing of the many other things needed to bring up children successfully. They should be protected from jobs for which they are not qualified. North Carolina offers its citizens the protection in the form of selective sterilization. Selective sterilization means the voluntary sterilization of men and women so they may live safely outside of institutions, live without danger to themselves or to the community. The operation is a simple one, which removes nothing from the body and does not change sex functions or feelings. It is not barnyard castration.
Awesome. Right? Way to sell it. Yeah.
Mental defectives who are sterilized may marry and lead satisfactory lives. Often they may become reasonably self-supporting if they are spared the responsibility of parenthood.
Now, if you feel like donating money to the Human Betterment League of North Carolina back in the 1930s, then that is the address in which you can send your money back in time. So yeah, that is normal thinking for them back then.
That was put in print. I'm laughing, but realistically, it's not that funny because they're saying like every redneck out there would qualify for sterilization. Well, I can say that because we've got Red Green and we all laugh at Red Green. We had, who were the other three big comedians that did, you might be a redneck if, and everybody laughs at that. And
Andrew Dice Clay, I think.
It's not Andrew Dice Clay, but he might
Jeff
be
Foxworthy.
too. Thank you, Jeff Foxworthy. Yeah. And then I know here in our little town of Ontario, or our little province of Ontario, we always say, oh, north of 7. Were you born north of 7? Or, oh, you don't want to ride the short bus, do you? These are things that we talk about, but we jokingly talk about it and kind of make fun of. However, this was an actual real thing in history. And did you know that the IQ tests that were invented way back when, they were actually used in the States to decide whether you qualified to be mandatorily sterilized or voluntarily sterilized. And that was used as medical information, actually taught in medical school.
Right.
If you scored, what was it now? If you scored a 0 to a 20 on your IQ test, you were considered an idiot. This is medical terminology. If you scored between 26 and 50, you were considered an imbecile. And if you scored between 51 and 70, you were considered a moron. And that's by the Henry Herbert Goddard IQ test. And it was in medical books. They actually taught it to doctors that this is how they were to decipher who should be sterilized and who shouldn't be.
Yeah, we'll have more on that in a minute. So a very brief history in Republic Plato, and then Republic, it was a book, Republic. Plato advocates for abolishing marriage to make way for breeding to up the Athenian elite stock. Plutarch discussed the Spartans dipping babies in wine and leaving them to the elements on a mountain, believing only the strong will survive. Historically, archaeologists are on much debate about whether or not that's real, but it sounds like a very Spartan thing to do. Darwin wrote The Origin of the Species, but he subtitled that Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So the theory of evolution, which is still a theory,
Yes,
was written by Darwin, and that is the thing that has kicked off the eugenics craze. Problems in eugenics. The first International Eugenics Congress was held in London, England in 1912. The president at the time, Major Leonard Darwin, who we saw earlier. Vice presidents included Dr. Alexander Graham Bell and the Right Honorable Winston Churchill, which is ironic because Winston Churchill went up against Hitler and called him out for his eugenics practices, and he actually was on the same side of that debate.
amazing.
Which is the ironic part of that. It's all theater, folks. So the U.S. adopted eugenics and then began leading the way in forced sterilization.
Yes.
So they took it in a dark turn.
And it was Charles Benedict Davenport who wrote The Heredity in Relation to Eugenics. He was the American that wrote that book. And that book, he had major, major influence on eugenics in the 20th century. And that textbook is what they were given in medical schools. And that's where they learned their medicine and eugenics. And Charles Davenport also founded the Race Betterment Foundation in 1906 in the States. And believe it or not, this is so crazy. When we were looking at the philanthropists that were involved, they got behind Charles Davenport and his Race Betterment Foundation and actually gave him money for it. Now, listen to some of the donors, the philanthropist donors who got behind this.
Would be
John Harvey Kellogg, Frosted Flakes, corn flakes.
Yep.
That guy funded eugenics. Carnegie Institution funded eugenics.
Now, is that Dale Carnegie? Is that how to win friends and influence people through killing them off?
You betcha, baby.
Okay.
You betcha.
I added the last part, but
it still works. Rockefeller Foundation, of course.
There they are.
Surprise,
always
surprise.
there.
And Harriman Railroad fortune. When Mrs. Harriman became a widow, her daughter was actually volunteering at the Race Betterment Foundation and managed to talk her mom into putting the railroad fortune into this. And she did.
Crazy.
Right? It's absolutely insane.
That's what I meant. Insane. So, so here are some of the categories that would land you either voluntary or probably forced sterilization. Feeble-minded, insane, criminalistic, epileptic keeps coming up quite a bit, and they had a hate on for epileptics. Inebriate, so all you alcoholics out there, diseased.
You would have been castrated.
Yeah, you would have been castrated or, chemically castrated. It's not barnyard castration. Come on. And then diseased with TB, syphilitic, the leprous, other chronic infections, and legally segregatable diseases.
So in today's day and age, that would have included COVID.
Which is weird because all of that was really, a lot of it was just contagious. So, you're kind of getting the bums a rush on that one. Blind people, and including those with seriously impaired vision, deaf people who's with seriously impaired hearing, deformed people, including the crippled, and dependent, including orphans, ne'er-do-wells, the homeless, tramps, and paupers.
And prostitutes also fell in that category.
Yeah,
the
morally, well, I had a list that included the morally imbecilic.
Oh, okay.
Is how they termed it. So it's ironic because they were advocating for sterilization of these people, and now we're like, our government's like, we're not going to sterilize them. We're just going to kill them. You're poor. And we're not going to force you to do it. We're just going to fool you into doing it yourself because that's much more entertaining for us. So, I mean, the parallels to Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Goodbye, YouTube. Is mind-boggling. And how people can't see it is beyond me. It's almost like you have to take an actual Nazi and stand them up in Parliament before people will wake up. Oh no.
Nope.
They won't even wake up.
They got standing ovations.
So any person will be considered as hereditarily diseased who is suffering from any one of the following diseases: congenital mental deficiency, schizophrenia, manic depressive insanity, hereditary epilepsy, hereditary chorea, hereditary blindness, hereditary deafness, any severe hereditary deformity. Any person suffering from severe alcoholism may also be rendered incapable of procreation.
But the funny thing is about this is it talks about hereditary. So what they were doing is keeping close tabs on your family tree. And if there was anybody in your family tree that suffered any of these ailments, they would possibly allow them to procreate. But if their next person if the next baby down the line ended up with one of these, then they castrated everybody immediately. And a lot of times they would take that baby out, euthanize that baby to stop any further procreation or stop the decline of society. And it meant, so if you were born and you had several siblings and one of your siblings ended up with one of these hereditary diseases because your mom had a hereditary disease, but you came out fine and your brother came out fine and your other brother came out fine, but the fourth baby didn't, all of yous would be sterilized.
All of you all.
Yeah. Because that for those who were in charge, that was enough to say that this disease is now hereditary because it's gone through two lines. So all of yous get sterilized so that there is no third line going forward.
That's right. It's called getting Brady bunched. Okay, so progression of eugenics. There was the positive eugenics, and that's how it started, where you plan good breeding to preserve stock. And then the negatives, obviously somebody come along and said, well, if we're going to improve the stock, why don't we just get rid of the bad stock? And that's where that got really pervasive in the United States. It got super dark. It got into racial lines. It got into all sorts of stuff. Now that had progressed in political eugenics, and they breed out the dissenters and the useless eaters while growing a compliant, needy population. We'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. And then finally, it's elevated into transhumanism, the creation of superhumans and perfecting the body, living forever, and immortality and eternal youth.
Exactly. And what they ended up doing in the States anyway, and I believe that this ended up being captured along all of the countries that believed in eugenics, it was a practice that I believe was even here in Canada, probably up till the 80s or 90s. I don't think it wasn't in play by the time I got married in 1999. But blood tests.
Goofs is not one of them.
Goofs was not one of them.
That's well below imbecile and idiot.
But what they started doing is taking and tracking your blood. And
Mhm.
it got to the point, and this is how marriage permits came about,
Yeah.
is the state or the government would take your blood samples and decide based on what your blood said, whether you were a good match to marry or not a good match to marry, of good stock or not good stock. And if they felt you weren't of good stock, you did not get the permit to marry and you were sent on your way. And if you ended up marrying, you had jail time and sterilization after that so that you could not reproduce.
Can confirm, because I remember them doing that up until the mid 70s. Even they were still doing that. I remember that you had to get a blood test, and that was a thing. So I was still alive. All right, just
Yeah.
been born.
As I said, I
Under
know
the
in the
wire.
90s they weren't doing it because I got married in the 90s and I didn't have to do a blood test or
No.
even provide what my blood work was. But
it was a practice up until way late that you just had to get your blood test when you were getting married.
And you weren't allowed to interracially marry either. You had to stay within your racial lines. Crossing those lines was not allowed.
That didn't happen until the 70s, like up until the 70s. But at the same time, they qualified it by saying you got to make sure you're not marrying your cousin or something. And so they would compare whether or not the blood was a match and whatnot. But we know from the Human Population Conference in Belfast in Belgrade in 1954 that they've been collecting all sorts of genomes, including human genomes, and storing them for data collection, and who knows what else they're storing them for. No, you got into cryptogenetics or cryptogenetics.
I talked about cryptogenetics. Yes.
Yeah, and so basically
but that happened after the Holocaust.
Right. Yeah. So after the Second World War, genetics for some reason, or eugenics for some crazy reason, had a bad name. And we all know who caused that, right?
Yes.
So they had to change it out. So now the language is changing and it's evolving. And now all of these different terms are used secretly and not as openly to talk about eugenics. So eugenics is obvious, but climate change is hooked in with overpopulation.
Yes. Biodigital convergence, demographic transformation, which has to do with immigration, really, designer babies, evolutionary change, family health, family planning, genome sequencing, overpopulation, racial cleansing, reproductive health, social cleansing, social engineering, and transhumanism. So when they decided after the Nuremberg trials, after World War II, and Hitler and the whole German army basically, and all their scientists were on trial, or supposedly on trial, because we know Operation Paperclip, a lot of them ended up here in the States and Canada. Because it basically left a really bad taste in everybody's mouth. And right up until then, the sterilization laws were on the books and it seemed like a really great thing. But by 1959, the Eugenics societies, there was the British Eugenics Society, there was the American Eugenics Society, they started losing members. In and around 1955 to 1959, members started walking away because of the Nuremberg trials and the Holocaust and what happened. Eugenics sort of developed a very negative connotation.
Well, it's partly because of this. So Trudeau,
not Trudeau,
Hitler studied. He said he studied with great interest the laws of several American states concerning prevention of reproduction by people whose progeny would be of no value or injurious to the racial stock. And then Robert Jackson said,
have done, and Robert Jackson is talking about the Nuremberg trials that were going on. He said, we have done or are doing some of the very things we are prosecuting the Germans for. And this is when they decided they needed to start erasing the UK, the British history, and the American history of eugenics and the laws that were on the books and the practices that they were involved in. And And so by 1959, a lot of their membership base had gone underground or had sort of vacated. So they are now losing funding and all of that sort of stuff. So they decided they needed to reinvent themselves. And that's when they decided to go into what they called crypto eugenics. And that's where all of these other names came from. So instead of openly saying eugenics, they'd say climate change, overpopulation, family planning, birth control. And, you know, lo and behold, you had Planned Parenthood that came along, and actually they had a different name, and then they changed the name to Planned Parenthood later on.
And they got a boost from a very unlikely source, which they weren't expecting. And that was the church.
For religious leaders in particular, there was a real sense that their cultural and social power was waning, that they were having to give way to professional social science or professional charity workers, and that the prestige and the knowledge that was being amassed on the side of secular institutions was in some ways, although it wasn't always expressed this way, it was felt to be competition for what the work that the churches were doing. So
were there critics even early on from within the Christian and Jewish worlds?
Yes, there were. I mean, in the late 19th and early 20th century, I did not uncover a ton of critics. The strongest and most vigorous critics emerged a little later, you know, in the late 1910s, early 1920s. But the ones who I did come across tended to be fundamentalist Christians. And by that, I mean, they did not stray from literal interpretations of scripture. They were generally suspicious of broad institutionalized efforts at social work and charity.
Almost all the advocates of eugenics, Herbert Spencer, Francis Galton, whom you already mentioned, Darwin's cousin, Margaret Sanger, were very self-consciously outspoken critics of charity. Like, charity is a real evil to them, and they attack it very much head on. Why did they hate? What made them hate charity so much?
And this was the idea that the real problem wasn't that we aren't having enough good people reproduce. It's that too many of the bad people are reproducing. And by bad people, they had all kinds of pseudoscientific rankings. You know, there was the feeble-minded being the most common term that was thrown about. So the idea of negative eugenics, which was the form embraced by people like Sanger and others, was that too many people who are feeble-minded are having too many kids, so we have to stop them. And charity, in their mind, encouraged that. By giving people housing and food and money, it actually gave them an ability to be comfortable enough to continue to produce children. And even if these became people who were productive members of society, their germplasm, as it was then called, their feeble-minded traits would be passed on to their offspring. Eugenics wasn't bad just because it was the state wielding its power against citizens. So a lot of Americans go, well, we can't, okay, that was terrible, that was bad, but we don't do that anymore. Eugenics is bad because the idea is that we have the power to manipulate human life in such a way as to forever alter every generation that comes afterwards. And we do have more of that power now. We have power the eugenicists could only have dreamed about, but human nature suggests we still lack the humility to wield it.
So an unlikely source from the churches, and they were actually ticked that some churches were actually trying to provide charity because that is working against them. So some churches were for, some churches were against, just like Nazi Germany. Some churches ran with them and some churches didn't. And just like COVID, some churches went with it and some churches didn't.
The proletariat churches, and the Protestant churches, they were the ones that were full on board with the eugenics narrative. Now, the Catholic churches were not so on board and were questioning why this was going on. And it got so bad that eugenics started incorporating immigration. And what they started advocating for was the Nordic people, or Anglo-Saxon and Northern Europeans, were allowed to migrate to the US, but anyone that was Southern European descent, there was quotas, or basically stoppage put on because a lot of the Italians were Roman Catholic, and the Catholic Church was not on board with eugenics. And it wasn't on board with eugenics because it went against the Bible. Their whole philosophy is, we're not God, we don't get to choose, and God makes us all in his image. And that includes the feeble-minded, the morons, the idiots, the imbeciles, the deformed, and those with mental illnesses. So the church, I guess it is it the fundamentalist churches that believed wholeheartedly in the Bible were against eugenics, but the churches that were like running
progressive,
that's the word I want to use, they were more in line with eugenics.
Right. Yeah, and every time we study eugenics, I can't tell how many times it's come up that this is predominantly a liberal thing.
Yeah.
And historically it has been anyway. So as you were saying, then they had to switch gears because it went from sterilization to Hitler going full blown, we're going to use this to kill people. And that was the dark days of eugenics.
That was a dark days. But I found this interesting.
Yeah.
Because we all equate Nuremberg with the Nuremberg trials and the Nuremberg Code, which is all wonderful things that came out of World War II, right? Or at least I thought they were. But what we didn't know, and what I didn't know, was that from 1935 to 1939, Germany had what was called Nuremberg Law. And Nuremberg Law was actually eugenics, sterilization.
Well, sterilization, and they went darker with it and turned it into euthanasia.
Yes, in 1939, that's when Hitler went one step further than the British and the Americans were willing to go, which was with euthanasia. And that was the Euthanasia Act, aka Action T4 is what they called it, which was the forced extermination of races that they didn't appreciate, those who were feeble-minded, the mentally deformed, all of those things that fell under the sterilization camp now also fell under Action T4.
Right, which is ironic because Hitler was a heroin user. Okay, so then they Hitler put a bad taste in everyone's mouth over eugenics. He also killed the Charlie Chaplin mustache for everyone, and also destroyed the swastika, which people have been using as peace symbols forever. So he took down a lot of stuff, and he retired a lot of things when he went with him. One of which was obviously eugenics, and that's clearly a good thing. But it didn't go away. This is when it went underground and it shifted, and so basically they didn't stop the eugenics, they just got a better marketing team, is basically how that went.
Welcome, the World Population Conference.
World Population Conference, not the Eugenics Conference. That was in, again, Belgrade.
That was the International Eugenics Congress.
1954, and then the
1912, 1921. 1912 was the first one. 1921 was the second one, and the second one was hosted by Alexander Graham Bell.
Oh, that's the Eugenics Conference.
Yes.
No, the world, they switched it. They started running everything through the UN. And then the UN changed it to world population and switched gears and called, how are we going to sell eugenics? Let's call it a world population problem. Thanks, Club of Rome, for making that report happen. And then let's switch gears because people are onto the overpopulation thing now. They're getting some attention. So we're going to just switch gears to call it climate change.
Yeah, well, Agenda 21 and the Paris Accord, right. and then climate change, and now it's the SDG goals and Agenda 2030.
Right, but one of the legs, obviously, is the International Planned Parenthood Association, and which, of course, ended up having, hey, the U.S. is like, well, now we can get back into it. So welcome Planned Parenthood for the states, and enter Margaret Sanger and Richard L. Day. Now, Richard L. Day was the head physician. What was he? Head of medical director of Planned Parenthood for a very long time. Now this matters because Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist.
As long as most of us have been involved in this organization, Margaret Sanger's legacy on race has been an open question. What people want to know is, was she or was she not a racist? And we've answered every question except that one. We've defended her as an avenger of bodily autonomy and self-determination who unfortunately and inconveniently was a product of her time. We've surrounded her with figures like W.E.B. Du Bois as a way to suggest that her eugenic beliefs were the norm. And we've worried that if we were the ones to call her racist, we'd be ceding ground to opponents of sexual and reproductive health. We've disavowed her eugenicist and ableist ideology. Zora Neale Hurston wrote, "There are years that ask questions, and there are years that answer." This year answered. We can no longer afford to reconcile or revise Margaret Sanger's legacy. We must reckon with it.
So that is Planned Parenthood eating some crow, well-deserved crow. And then going back to here, the other one was Richard L. Day, who was very involved in Planned Parenthood. And he's cropped up before. We've done 2 shows on him in the form of New Order of the Barbarians. And it was one man talking about his talk when he went in the 60s, late 60s. He saw Richard L. Day talk, and he was an insider globalist, basically. And he was saying, this is how it's going to lay out. If you haven't seen those shows, New Order of the Barbarians, we kind of do the Cole's Notes in 2 shows on that. Or you can head over to our Brighteon page and TFM report on brighteon.com, and you can listen to the whole thing. It's 3 hours long. So fill your boots. So that's Robert Day, but here's Robert Day. He predicted a whole bunch of stuff that came true 20 years later. But here's one of the things that he says.
Anybody who was lazy enough to want the convenience food rather than fixing his own also better be energetic enough to exercise, because if he was too lazy to exercise and too lazy to fix his own food, then he didn't deserve to live very long. This was all somewhere along in here. There was also something about accelerating the onset of puberty, and this was said in connection with health, and later in connection with education, and connected to accelerating the process of evolutionary change. There was a statement that we think we can push evolution faster and in the direction we want it to go.
So now we're getting to the core of it.
Pushing it to the evolution of where we want the human to go.
Now we're talking about like what has been the common theme of eugenics all the way from the beginning of eugenics, all the way to dipping babies in wine and leaving them on the mountain, all the way up to transhumanism, and we are going to upload ourselves into the computer. There is a common theme all the way along there, and that is people who believe that they should play God.
The acceleration of the human evolution.
So to prove that it never went away, it just got reworded. We've got some documents for you. Hey, welcome back to Agenda 21. We've talked lots about this. We're still going through it and picking out things, but here are some of the things that Agenda 21 talks about.
Full 5.17 of Agenda 21, full integration of population concerns into national planning, policy, and decision-making processes should continue. Population policies and programs should be considered with full recognition of women's rights. It's really funny because all through Agenda 21, it talks about women's rights and the rights of minority and children, never men's rights.
No, we don't really have any, apparently.
You don't have any, 5.12, awareness should be increased of the fundamental linkages between improving the status of women and demographic dynamics, particularly through women's access to education, primary and reproductive health care programs, economic independence, and their effective, equitable participation in all levels of decision-making. Because apparently women didn't participate in decision-making in the past.
Right. There's a little tiny thing they pass over there, and we're going to highlight it a little bit later and talk about one of the actual goals and not their, that they're trying to keep secret.
5.16, existing plans for sustainable development have generally recognized demographic trends and factors as elements that have a critical influence on consumption patterns, production, lifestyles, and long-term sustainability. Policy should be designed to address the consequences of population growth built into population momentum, while at the same time incorporating measures to bring about demographic transition.
There's that demographic transition we talked about. So they want to guide demographics and make policies around population growth and who gets to grow, who doesn't get to grow. Now, here's the thing about Agenda 21. They figured their words out.
Yes.
They're starting to get marketing. So they're hiding a lot of stuff. They're kind of coming at it back doorways. So the thing about Agenda 21 is Agenda 21 is this thick, but then it references a whole bunch of documents, and now all of a sudden it's this thick. So Jody and I are still like, we're still going through this crap.
Massive.
Yeah.
But you realize that the words that they're choosing, they're being very, very careful about the words they choose. They're actually saying one thing. And if you don't know the history of getting to the point of Agenda 21, if you don't know the history of the World Population Conferences and eugenics and all of that, then you think what they're saying sounds really cozy and warm and sounds like a good thing.
Fuzzy.
But when you realize the documents that they are referring back to, it's not a good thing. It's actually eugenics that they're talking about. It's talking about preserving the purest and the best bloodlines as defined by them. The hierarchy of the family elites is what they're trying to actually preserve. And eugenics, at the end of the day, is what they're talking about when they're talking about population growth and the problems associated with population growth.
Right. And so again, it's just a way to pitch eugenics. So now in Agenda 21, it mentions down there, it mentions in the beginning, and this is where it gets really convoluted because they reference other documents all the time. So you go to that document, which references another document. So it's sometimes 2 and 3 jumps before you get to the thing they're actually referencing. So they've made it intentionally convoluted so you don't know what they're talking about. So Agenda 21 down at the bottom there makes reference of General Assembly Resolution 4428 or 228 of 22 in December of 89. So we go there, and that's this one. So that's a whole nother document. You got to search it out, find it, and then find the thing they're talking about there. And then it says, recalling its resolution 43 out of 196 of 20 December 1988 on the United Nations Conference of Environment and Development. So you finally get there to that resolution, and all it does is point you to another conference. So that brings us over to the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment in 1972. And in 1972, up until about 1980, they weren't watching their words so much. They were a little more open about their dialogue and what they published to the public. So recommendation 12, 1 and 2, it is recommended that the WHO and other United Nations agencies should provide increased assistance to governments which so request in the field of family planning programs without delay. Now, remember, family planning programs is
the crypto-eugenist word.
Right. It is further recommended that the WHO, World Health Organization, should promote and intensify research endeavor in the field of human reproduction so that the serious consequences of population explosion on human environment can be prevented. Now, just stop there for half a second. Again, they're talking about how to stop people from reproducing, yet everywhere else in their documents, they say it is a woman's right to decide how many kids she wants, the spacing that she wants, and with whom she wants to have them with. That gets repeated over and over and over again, but yet here they're talking about how do we limit
the
growth.
Serious
dichotomy.
Consequences of population growth, because they've already figured out the statistics of having babies who are deformed, or babies that have hereditary diseases, or babies that have mental disabilities,
right,
or in their minds score low on IQ tests. They know that the statistical probability of that is super high the more children that people have. So they want to keep that as small as possible.
Right. And again, they don't have to sterilize people when you're going to do it for them, right? It's much more fun for them to trick you into doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So the third part of that is that the WHO will coordinate the development and implementation of an appropriate international collection and dissemination system to correlate medical, environmental, and family history data. Now,
and this is how they know whether you are going to be a problem with the overpopulation growth.
Right. Now, if you watched our show, Deep Pop Culture, we talk a lot about the World Population Conference. We reference that a lot. And there is so many references about them storing genomes and creating biomes and doing experimentation. So they're saving seed banks, but they're also saving soil samples. They are saving, so they know where the best soil is. They know where the best plants are. They know where the best livestock is. And there is reference, very, very briefly reference, that they're doing the same thing
with human
people,
resources.
With people. And we've seen, again, with the blood tests, we've seen the samples of that. And just going back to that, 1, 2, and recommendation 12 and 76B all talk about the WHO being in charge of population control. And what's happening right now, James Roguski will tell you, does this organization sound like an organization that should be in charge of global health?
Hell no, is what I'm saying.
No.
Because this is an organization that 100% its focus is on eugenics, crypto eugenics.
Correct.
Okay. 90, Central African Republic was in favor of retaining the recommendation with the following amendments. The replacement of the words family planning by the words family health in the first sentence, and the deletion of the last phrase of the second sentence after the words human reproduction.
Now, I don't actually know what he's referencing there, but we wanted to show that because there they are in the 70s. They're planning out what words to use, what words not to use, and they're changing phrases so it sounds more palatable to the masses.
Far more friendly. 101, the representative of the Holy See,
the Vatican,
stated that the relationship between excessive population and environmental deterioration had not yet been clearly elucidated. For instance, the first countries to suffer from environmental degradation had problems of overpopulation.
So there you go. Climate change means overpopulation. Overpopulation means climate change. That's how they're tying it together right there.
And 316, the representative of Zambia stated that it should be clear that overpopulation was not the only cause of poverty. More often, it was the lack of resources and poor soil.
What are we seeing now? We're seeing environmental spills. We're seeing derailed trains. We're seeing explosions. We're seeing chemtrails. We're seeing lack of resources.
But what they're not saying is that they're the ones causing this and then blaming it on overpopulation and overuse of resources. Hence, we need to get the population under control. But they're not talking about the DEWs and the solar engineering and the geoengineering and all of the chemicals that they're throwing on everything and the GMOs. They're not talking about that. Yeah. It all relates back to overpopulation. And, all through the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the SDGs, all through that, they talk about women's rights and children's rights and the vulnerable populations. They don't talk about men, but what they're talking about is giving women the opportunity to stay in school longer, to set up careers, to financially contribute to society, which inevitably puts off having a family, having children to a much, much later date in time. And we know that for women, especially, men can procreate right up until they're 100 years old. That sperm is still functioning. But women have a very small window of time to actually procreate. And then our eggs are no good, or we go into menopause.
Just like chickens.
So why they focus so much on women is the longer they can push off a women's fertile cycle in favor of economically producing and giving back to society, the fewer women or fewer children a woman will actually give birth to, hence contributing to the overpopulation problem.
Yeah, that is one side of that coin, and we're going to get a little deeper into the other side of that coin. So here we go.
And on that note, just so you know, when the U.S. had their sterilization laws in effect, 61% of the people that were sterilized were women, not men, women. And they sterilized over 64,000 people, 61% of them being women, in a very short time frame. I can't remember the time frame now. I think it was over a period of 30 years. Over 64,000 women. Now, Germany, on the other hand, in a period of 5 years, I think it was, did over 400,000 people. So I guess we should be thankful that only 64,000 people in the U.S. were sterilized. But
Germans are efficient. We'll give them that.
Women were the target in the UK, in the US, and in Germany. In most of the countries that participated in eugenics, women were the target.
Man, you guys just can't catch a break, can you?
No. We're now the target, even in today's world, we're the target. They're targeting our children now. They're not just targeting grown women, they're targeting our children.
So self-prescribed feminist Justin Blackface Trudeau. This is from 2017, but now that we've done all the hard work now, you can see the languaging. Justin Trudeau marks International Women's Day with $650 million for reproductive rights. And I'll let you take that.
Justin Trudeau marks International Women's Day with $650 million for reproductive rights. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau marked International Women's Day by promising $650 million for reproductive health and rights around the world. The money, which will be invested over a 3-year period, will support projects that provide sex education, strengthening reproductive health services, and support family planning and contraceptives. It will also fund programs to prevent and respond to sexual and gender-based violence, including forced marriage and female genital mutilation, and supporting the right of women to get safe and legal abortions.
Well, woohoo. Sounds like utopia for women.
Right?
At least there's no secret agenda.
None whatsoever. The figure represents a doubling of current funding, Trudeau said in Ottawa this morning. Canada is also supporting initiatives that will accelerate the use of contraceptives by 2020. This is not only a tragedy, it is a missed opportunity for many countries that could benefit greatly from the economic contributions of women.
There we go. Get them in the workforce. There we go. That is, there's more, but
let's get women using contraceptives. Let's get them in the workforce because they're not successful to our country. They're not considered a success in our country unless they are adding to the economic growth, not population growth, because we want them on contraceptives. Economic growth of our country.
Right.
For far too many women and girls, unsafe abortions and lack of choices in reproductive health mean that they are either at risk of death or simply cannot contribute or achieve their potential through education, through involvement in their community, through a broad range of opportunities. He said, it is important that as a world, we recognize that empowering women, that respecting their rights is fundamental to building a world in which everyone has a real and fair chance to succeed. Having children is not considered a success.
No, I've said it several times, kind of getting sick of the idea that we're trying to promote the fact that kids are like a virus that needs to be eradicated. Children are a blessing for starters, so have many. But again, it's just like Bill C-63, where they talk about protecting children, but they're actually using that to exploit. They're exploiting children because they really want to push through the censorship bill, and they want to get rid of words. And so they say, unless you support this bill, you're not supporting children. So they exploit children to push through their stupid agenda.
Exactly.
They're doing the same thing with women here. They exploit women to push their stupid agenda. These are all talking points from the UN.
That's it. And they're wrapping it in women's minds that they're not successful as a woman unless they're educated and unless they are providing economically and financially to the community. That being a mother is not success. It is the wrong focus.
Right.
And taking away the ability for a woman to feel proud of herself because she's a great mom is disgusting and demoralizing.
Right. Because they are building our children, and our children are, I'm going to say it, the children are our future. If you teach them well and lead them in the way to go. Anyway, I got lots more to say about that, but we'll move on. I mean, it is disgusting with the doublespeak. It really is. Like, we know they're going after nuclear families. We know that, and so there's a big shift here. I mean, we are shifted from getting rid of the bad stock, getting rid of the feeble-minded and the moral degenerates, and it looks like they went from that to decidedly switching gears and flooding the market. And now you have people who are willing, you've got these women with Munchausen syndrome who are willing to let their children get mutilated so they can no longer reproduce. So they're killing off their own bloodlines, and moms are throwing parties when they do it. That is the epitome of everything they were trying to get rid of in the 30s, if you ask me.
But now moms are doing it for them.
Right. And so, and they're doing it for them. They're killing their own bloodlines. We're mating out so many people, and we're about to mate out people with mental health issues who don't know
Next
better.
year.
They want to mate out children. They want to mate out poor people. Like, this has gone beyond what Hitler's done, because they're convincing you and the rest of the population that it's a noble thing.
Yeah.
Hitler didn't even have that power. It's ridiculous where we're at with this. And so I've been racking my brain, like, there are two factors here. If these hardcore eugenicists still believe in that stuff, why would they flood the market with what they would consider bad stock, and B, why are they going after the straight white males, which predominantly were always historically considered the upper race,
cream of the
and
top.
I get it, and I'm not saying that's the case, but it seems very off for these people who believe in this stuff. It seems off brand for them. There's a guy who is talking, I think he's pro eugenics from what I can tell, but he's talking about how the government's misusing eugenics, but he nails it. And he says, first, it exponentially increased the population of the degenerate and dependent part of the population in the United States. And second, this increase in the degenerate population has created a need to hire ever increasing numbers of parasitic public employees. Now,
he's right.
Yeah, disagree with his
Our
philosophy.
own government, since Trudeau came to power, has doubled.
Right, he's bringing in all these immigrants, which raises their income, raises the power of the government, and just like in Bill
C-63.
Thank you. Just like in that one, they're saying, well, now we need to monitor all these people who can't behave properly. We're going to have to push them into good behavior. And it literally says that in the bill. And in order to do that, we're going to have to create 3 new departments with all this new staff. And we're going to fund them by getting them to crack down on censorship and basically find themselves into power. So this is exactly what that guy is saying. This is what the government's doing. They're using Marxism and they're flooding the market with people who just don't care to increase government.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're doing.
That is.
Now, the other thing is like, well, why? Why, I don't care if you want to say it's white privilege or male privilege or hoodoo privilege or whatever you want to call it. There is a decided attack on the straight white male for sure, and white people in general, we're all under attack now. Why that particular, why are they coming after us so hard? Right. Well, no, Yuval Noah Harari, right? He has a clue for us. And if you don't know this guy, he's not the Antichrist, but he's freaking left hand. He sits at the left hand.
Lovely passage where you say, looking at the world today, God seems to be making a comeback, but this is a mirage. God is dead. It just takes a while to get rid of the body.
So that's a reference to Christians. We are the body. If you read your
Body
Bible,
of Christ.
we are the body. So they are decidedly, because we're the ones who are proponents of Jesus and God, and they want to get rid of God. Like he says, God is dead. That's the thing about eugenicists, transhumanists, globalists. They want to remake the world in their image and not God's image. They want to mock God's creation. They want to make the world in their own image. So they want to be God.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, they have to do what first?
What do they need to do first? They need to eradicate God.
They need to get rid of God. And if that sounds really extreme, listen to our friend Harari once again.
So in the first book of Genesis, what God does is to create animals and plants and humans. And we now want to gain this ability to ourselves to manufacture animals and plants and humans. And we even go beyond God. I mean, even if you believe in the Bible, the only thing the God of the Bible managed to create is organic beings. He managed to create the cows and the tomatoes and the giraffes and the humans, all organic. Now we try to go beyond the God of the Bible and create inorganic life, something he never managed to do. We don't have to wait until Christ's second coming in order to overcome death. A couple of geeks in a laboratory can do it if you give them enough time and money.
So two things there. I mean, he acknowledges God.
He acknowledges God. God only made organic stuff. We've done it one better. We've taken his organic stuff and made it non-organic. He's never done that. No, he didn't have to, because the original was the best.
But honestly, you can mess with life, but they still don't have the ability to actually create life.
No, and the life they're creating is actually making organic life sick, because it's all chemicals.
Right.
None of it's real.
So he's talking about how much better than God he is, but he's passing over a lot of really important things.
Put
now,
those GMO tomato slices in salt water and watch how they swim, unlike a real tomato.
Yeah, that was really gross. Take some GMO foods, cut it into a little strip and put it in salt water. It actually swims. That's really disgusting.
And this is exactly why God didn't mess with organic.
Right. So then you have to ask, well, if they want to replace God, what do they think of you? We've even played a video where he says, wow, we don't know what to do with all the useless leaders. Maybe just give them drugs and video games. And that's what he says. But here he talks about it again.
So the 21st century might revolve around the fears and problems and hopes of a new massive useless class. People who are useless, not from the viewpoint of their mother or children, but useless from the viewpoint of the political and economic system.
So
you're useless unless you are contributing economically. So mothers are useless unless they're actually working.
So say what you want. That's eugenics language right there. So it's again, it goes right into transhumanism, where we want to cheat death and be young forever and improve on God's creation. It is the need to be God is what drives a lot of these people.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you have so much money and you can buy anything you want and go anywhere you want, and you've got everything you could possibly ever want, you get bored. Lego's not enough to keep your active brain working. So what do? You mess with God's creation.
Well, or there's a lot of people out there who hate God, and it doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. There is a whole bunch of people who run the world who are very satanic, and they do believe in God, and they just hate him. So to wrap up, we've got a couple little videos for you. This one is talking about new eugenics and genetics and responsibility. And this is a scientific community who's like, oh yeah, the eugenics is dark, you know, so we need to have a new set of rules when we go forward with eugenics.
Concern is they buy into that idea that they need to do as much as they can to ensure a healthy child. When there's a genetic problem with their fetus, the knee-jerk reaction is, it started with Tay-Sachs, so it must be the same. And so automatically they start thinking about ending that pregnancy, because if it weren't bad, why would you have tested me for this in the first place?
As we consider our options, as individuals and as a society, there is also the shadow of history.
No matter what we do, the one line we should never cross is this always has to be voluntary. It should never be a mandate that you have to have genetic screening or testing.
We have to be incredibly on our guard that we're not simply looking at people and saying, I've decided your life is not worth living. This has happened before, and as our science gets more powerful, we shouldn't let it happen again.
Sounds like they genuinely actually are maybe on the right side of it.
It sounds like that, but at the same time, they plant that fear in women that they should be testing their bodies. Once they hit a certain age and you become pregnant, you should have amniotic fluid testing, because so much could be wrong with your baby. So already they implant fear that there's something wrong and you should test. And if they find something, you should abort. That's what they talk to you about. And again, they're talking about designer babies. You can test through the amniotic fluids. You can do IVF. You can, you know, they've got incubators now that they can grow babies in and take out from your DNA and your partner's DNA the best of the best to try and make sure you get brown eyes and brown hair or beautiful skin or what have you. They've got sperm banks that women can now go to. You don't need to be married anymore. Get your career ongoing, become the CEO of a company, and then go to the sperm bank and grab yourself some sperm. And you know what? You get to choose the sperm, and you can pick the best of the best of the best. And we already know there was one doctor who clearly practiced in eugenics, because he was the one impregnating all these women with sperm that he was saying belonged to the choice that they made. But realistically, it was his sperm, because he thought he was the most dominant and most perfect of. And I think he had, I don't know what, I think I watched a documentary on it a couple of years ago. I think they ended up finding like 48 kids that all matched his DNA. Now he was brought up on charges and all that sort of stuff. But this is happening now. And it's going to continue to happen if we allow it to happen. This is crypto eugenics.
Just got to wake up to it and know what's happening and call it out. You know, when they're trying to force what looks like good things and human rights and this and that and the other thing, just remember you're in a big club and you're not in it.
Yeah. And they claim to care about you. It looks like they care about you.
They're exploiting you every time.
Exactly.
So we even had a clip. Remember the clip from 2014? I've got it here somewhere. It's the lady talking at the World Economic Forum, how they were using mRNA to change DNA sequences, and they were changing black mice to white mice. I mean, that is so thinly veiled. It's unbelievable.
And that was like what, 10, 12 years ago or something like that.
We'll play it again at some point. It's on our rally video.
Well, even in North Carolina, way back when, they actually used guinea pigs, stapled to a board.
Dead. They were dead. But talking about eugenics, and look, if you mate white with white, you always get white. But if you mate black with white, you're going to eradicate the white race. And if you mate black with black, you might end up with white. So we need to stop that too. All this crazy stuff that they've been doing since the beginning of time all has to do with keeping the elite bloodlines flowing, and everyone else they consider to be useless eaters, useless imbeciles. And they know who they want, because they've been keeping since the beginning of the 1900s
they've been keeping databases, family trees, bloodlines, and all you people who donated your blood to Ancestry.com, you helped build their database. Anybody who gives blood, they've been, and not that that's a bad thing, it really isn't, but they've been taking that blood and testing it and again, adding to their databases. So they know who they want and who they don't want.
Well, I don't know if they're doing blood anymore. That might just go directly to the blood bank. Maybe, maybe not. But the biggest DNA capture obviously is Ancestry.com and of the like, you know, and they'll give you some BS result. Somebody even sent out like 3 or 4 tests and they all came back different. Right?
You know what? I don't even know if it's BS results. Because they've got such an extensive database, it may not be BS results. I know my daughter a few years ago participated in that, and she was so excited because it came back that 98% of her DNA was of British descent, and 2%, I think, was like Egyptian or Saudi Arabian or something like that, which was so bizarre.
I think we all are. Yeah, but at the same time, it is a way to grab your DNA and log it and capture it as well. So, yeah, so we have stacks and stacks and stacks of books and documents and whatnot on eugenics. I'm going to add it to our website. So you can go to our website, to our resources page, and go to Chris's research documents, and we'll start a whole new thing on eugenics, which I haven't done yet. But if you want to fill your boots with eugenics, you certainly can. It doesn't tell you how to do it. Go get a CRISPR and a manual and you'll be fine.
But that is, I believe, it for what we are going to talk about. Yeah. We did download, is it a 12-minute clip or
there's
a
12-minute video? Yeah. So
if you want to stay and watch that, be our guest. It's a really beautiful 12-minute wrap up of everything that we talked about. Yeah. So Lori, I know you said you just joined us and you wanted to know if you missed much. You did, but if you stay and watch this 12-minute clip, it'll give you a really great Cole's notes of what we just finished talking about for the last hour and a bit. And for everybody else, stay and watch the film or the clip, or don't. Your choice. We're not going to do commentary afterwards. We'll just go right into our ending credits. So stay if you like, don't if you don't. In the meantime, Monday, we are not here. It is Easter Monday. It is a stat holiday, so please enjoy it with your family. Yep. Share some chocolate with your kids. Share a lot of laughs. Enjoy your weekend. And don't forget, also on Monday at 10 a.m., there is flag wags happening all the way from Windsor to Ottawa on the major highways. Get out and support and join some of your freedom people and those who don't want to pay the carbon tax and want to send a message to the government. There's all kinds of events going on all weekend long, all next week. Look at your telegrams and your signals and your Facebooks and your Instagrams, because I know people are posting it all over social media. So if you want to participate, go for it. Wednesday, they'll be at Freeland's office. So you might want to mark Wednesday on your calendar, and it's through the day. I think it's 1 o'clock, or it's either 11 a.m. or 1 o'clock. But look for that. Axe the Tax protests all over the country. Wednesday, Freeland's office. Monday, find a bridge near your home. Go and stand on it, or join any of the convoys that are happening going to the borders. But let your MPs and your MPPs know you do not want that extra tax on you, especially when they're giving themselves a raise and they didn't give you a raise. Stand up. It's time to stand up.
Right. So that's it for us. We've never done this before, but this was a good video and we didn't want to put 12 minutes in the middle of the show. Stick around. You want to watch the video, the nice sum up. If not, love you. Thanks everyone for watching. We will see you next Thursday with a big show. All right. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.
The term eugenics means good genes or good origin. It was coined in 1883 by British scientist Sir Francis Galton. He defined eugenics as a moral philosophy to improve humanity by encouraging the best and brightest to breed. Galton was the half-cousin of Sir Charles Darwin, the famous originator of the theory of evolution, which also would come to be known as Darwinism. The three main tenets of Darwinism are the evolutionary transformation from one species into others, natural selection is the cause of divergence in species, the drive behind evolution is the sexual reproductive instinct, and that life is a constant struggle for survival. Galton actually used the theory of evolution to substantiate his new science of eugenics. In his book, Studies on Hereditary Genius, he attempted to prove that the aristocratic families of the British Empire were in fact a superior race. The fact that in the struggle for life, they had made it to the very top of society proved that they were the best that humanity had to offer. It is important to note that Darwin's famous Origin of Species is actually subtitled Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Not surprisingly, the Royal Society, a scientific institution dedicated to the improvement of natural knowledge, picked up on these new ideas and promoted Darwin heavily. Being a creation of the British monarchy, the Royal Society was obviously in favor of promoting the idea of the genetic superiority of the royal family. Science itself was being positioned to replace the old religious appeal of the divine right of kings to rule over the inferior masses. Darwin himself stated, "Elite status is prima facie evidence of evolutionary superiority." Through scientism, science as religion, Darwinism could in fact bring about social change. Social Darwinism would manifest itself as eugenics. To eugenicists, the masses were cattle, with Galton calling eugenics the science of improving the stock. The rise of scientism spawned the widespread proliferation of eugenics, as it reached American shores at the turn of the century. The Eugenics Record Office in Cold Springs Harbor, New York, went to work, amassing hundreds of thousands of family pedigrees for genetic research. They also lobbied for state sterilization acts and other eugenic legislation. In 1899, Henry Clay Sharp, a prison physician, began sterilizing degenerate prisoners. And later in 1907, he was a key advocate for a law in Indiana which was passed, mandating the compulsory sterilization of degenerates throughout the state. In 1921, the American Eugenics Society was formed and began propaganda campaigns, which included the promotion of eugenics in churches, schools, and state fair exhibitions. Funding for American eugenics came from the Carnegie, Harriman, and Rockefeller families, among others. Eugenics was being accepted as a genuine form of science. Social Darwinism made strong advances toward a world in which scientism would fulfill Galton's dream of having eugenics be the religion of the future. But a major setback occurred at the end of World War II. It was discovered that American eugenics had been a major influence on Hitler's final solution. In 1934, Rudolf Hess had stated that National Socialism is nothing but applied biology. Hitler had only wanted to preserve the best German stocks and elevate them to a dominant position within society. It was at this point in eugenics history that a crucial move had to be made in order to hide eugenics from the now aware masses of humanity. Prominent eugenicist Julian Huxley stepped up and offered a solution. He simply invented a new word to replace eugenics, that term being transhumanism, which he defined as a need for mankind to realize the importance of steering the direction of its own evolution. Yes, eugenics was one of the original aspects of transhumanism, and it is no surprise, as Julian was the grandson of Thomas Henry Huxley, who had been a president of the Royal Society and one of the most well-known advocates of Darwinism in its early days. Julian, being properly raised, was educated at Oxford, his specialty being evolutionary biology. He went on to many high-level positions, which included the titles of Vice President and President of the British Eugenics Society, which of course had the task of removing undesirable variants from the human gene pool. Julian Huxley has said the following of eugenics: "The lowest strata are reproducing too fast. Therefore, they must not have too easy access to relief or hospital treatment, lest the removal of the last check on natural selection should make it too easy for children to be produced or to survive. Long unemployment should be a ground for sterilization." Transhumanism was born out of humanism, which is yet another form of scientism, characterized by its faith in the power of human beings to create their own future. Yet another clever rationalization for eugenics as the creative force behind man-made evolution. No one doubts the wisdom of managing the germplasm of agricultural stocks, so why not apply the same concept to human stocks? Among Huxley's many distinguished positions, one which stands out was that of being the first ever Director General of UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. The job of the organization being to bring culture to the Third World. Culture being the worldwide spread of eugenic philosophy. It will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care, and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake, so that much that now is unthinkable may at least become thinkable. Darwinism is a religion to the global power elite, who do believe themselves superior to the masses of humanity. Humanism and transhumanism were clever disguises, created specifically so that global eugenics operations could be carried out without being noticed. Insiders referred to their continued work as crypto-eugenics, as they were carried out covertly. Prominent among this crowd was the grandson of Charles Darwin, Charles Galton Darwin, a distinguished fellow of the Royal Society and president of the British Eugenics Society. In 1952, his book The Next Million Years was published. In it, he describes 5 great revolutions throughout human history, the 5th of which had not yet happened, but when it did, it would kickstart the next million years of human evolution. This 5th revolution would involve using science to alter human nature itself, possibly creating a race of supermen. This, of course, is the familiar transhumanist ideal of the post-human. If man is really a tame animal, there is no reason why breeds of man should not be created. Although Galton Darwin was skeptical of this point, because he believed that man is untamable. He goes on to illustrate this point with a hypothetical story of an island in which a visionary director gathers a variety of highly skilled people and institutes a social Darwinistic breeding program. Members of the island breed with each other based on their unique talents, intelligence, or beauty. For instance, 2 athletic people would give birth to a new generation of superior athletes. The population would become tame, but the island's director would not. Though it might conceivably be possible to tame the majority of mankind, this could only be done by leaving untamed a minority of the population. Moreover, this minority would have to be the group possessing the most superior qualities of all. The message is clear. Darwin is legitimizing the elite ruling class, which he himself is a part of. The 3rd tenet of Darwinism, that sexual instinct causes conflict, is also addressed in this book. Galton Darwin offers up a scientific solution. With the knowledge of the various sexual hormones, it might also become possible to free the majority of mankind from the urgency of sexual impulse, so that they could live contented, celibate lives. He goes on and on about how the struggle for survival will cause global conflict, and that eugenics operations will be a necessity to control population growth. He applauds China for its long history of civil services, which predate those of Europe by millennia. China is described as the model type of civilization for a world which will ultimately be unified through technology. Galton Darwin has a fascination with insects, stating that humans should resemble workers in an anthill. He goes on to say, "There might be a drug which, without other harmful effects, removed the urgency of sexual desire, and so reproduced in humanity the status of workers in a beehive." It is this human beehive which has been the ideal society in the eyes of elites for a very long time. This will be the template for post-humanity, the ultimate slave race, scientifically designed to never rebel. The transhumanists have a popular term, hive mind, which refers to the giant collective intelligence which will be created when people the world over link their brains together with technology. Their general belief is that this new experience will be wonderful, creating a whole new superintelligence through symbiotic existence. In reality, the hive mind will be Galton Darwin's beehive, the creation of the new man, which has been written about for many years.